Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast. This is your host, Ryan Coyle, joined alongside Kevin Walder again as we wrap up the NFC section of our NFL season preview. We've ran through the East, we've ran through the North, and we've ran through the South. Today, we will be hitting up the West. So then we'll have our total NFC playoff picture out to you guys before we move on to the other side of the conference. But before we get started, just how are you doing, Kevin? And got anything you want to say before the show starts?
I'm doing all right. Taking summer classes right now, so been doing that all day. But so it'll be nice to get to talk about sports a little bit here.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Uh, so far, like the thing I've noticed through our shows have been NFC East and NFC North. We were pretty similar throughout those. NFC South as well. But this one is kind of where our opinions differ. The order is completely different. We don't have teams in the same spots at all. So that'll be kind of cool to break down and see both sides of the story. So I hope you guys enjoy this. But I'll start it off with my surprise team of the league this year. Every year I feel like there's a team that comes out of nowhere and makes that big leap. Last year was really the 49ers. Year before that was probably, you could say, it was the Eagles, or was that, no, that was 2 years ago when the Eagles came out of nowhere and won the Super Bowl. So last year was the 49ers. And I think there's a team in the AFC that I'll touch on at a later date that has a chance to do that. But my NFC first place team in the West and the number 2 overall seed in the conference is Arizona Cardinals at 12-4, going 4-2 in the division. I've got them at a B plus for their offensive grade. I'm very excited to see this team and especially this unit though, because we've seen over the years QB's taken that big leap in year 2, and Kyler Murray didn't have like great flashy numbers his rookie year, but he still won Offensive Rookie of the Year. He proved that he could be a starting quarterback and meshed well with Cliff Kingsbury. So that second year with the coach, that's going to just increase his production even more, I think. I think he's going to take a big leap this season. In Vegas, they have him as a top 5 MVP candidate at most of the odds. So I'm also excited to see Christian Kirk's progression in year 2. I think he's going to be a very solid receiver. You still have the ageless Larry Fitzgerald, who just seems to keep producing no matter how old he is. And then you added one of the top 3 receivers in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins, and you only had to give up David Johnson, who is aging and kind of been irrelevant for that Cardinals team over the past few years. So you have a very good trio of receivers, along with Kenyan Drake, who broke out last year as a versatile running back that can do it all. He can affect the screen game. He can catch the ball out wide even. And with Kingsbury's creative offense, he's going to move an explosive playmaker like Drake around. It's a very friendly offensive system. So the real question is that I've holding them back is, can their offensive line hold up? They picked Isaiah Simmons in the first round instead of investing in the offensive line. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And who steps up at tight end? It's kind of a big question mark. They got really no one there right now. So can a tight end just step up as a reliable red zone guy, third down guy, just someone who can move the chains? But wide receiver that I like on this team, I mean, this is my breakout player for him, so I'll knock this out as well. Andy Isabella he was a draft pick last year, a mid-round pick from UMass. He's a 4.34 guy, so that thing that I think Kyler Murray could really do to take his game to the next level is look to hit guys like Christian Kirk and Andy Isabella down the field more. I think Isabella is going to find a bigger role in his second year and really step up and produce for Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury and help take that offense to an even another level. So for defense, I gave them a B. They got an elite pass rusher in Chandler Jones. They added, I think, in my opinion, the best defensive player in the draft in Isaiah Simmons, who, as we know from following the draft and whatnot in college football, he'll line up everywhere. He's going to play safety, linebacker. He's going to blitz. So I'm very excited to see what he does and how good he can be off the bat. Jordan Hicks is a very good linebacker when healthy. That's a big if throughout his tenure with the Eagles. He never really stayed healthy, but last year with the Cardinals he was. So, I mean, it seems like everyone who plays in Philadelphia gets hurt, but we'll see if Hicks can hold up. But when he's on the field, he's one of the more underrated linebackers in the league. You still got Patrick Peterson, who's still a very good corner, despite him aging, and Buda Baker and Byron Murphy are two very good young players in the secondary as well. So the secondary is a pretty strong unit, and you add Simmons, who's going to play back there, and that linebacker. But they need more players to step up in the pass rush outside of Chandler Jones. I mean, he's an elite player. He's going to get you double-digit sacks, but I think in order to be an elite team, like I have them as 12-4, they need more people to step up in the pass rush. That's the big question. I gave Kingsbury a B- coach. I mean, he didn't have that much success in year one, but he held his ground, and he really proved that he can coach offense in the NFL. A lot of people were worried because he got fired from Texas Tech, and he was going to go to USC to be the offensive coordinator, and the Cardinals swooped in and hired him as a head coach. So that was kind of a bold strategy, a bold move, but I gave him a B-. I'm excited to see what he can do in his second year as a coach. Kind of like how we saw with Doug Peterson. That was a bold at the time as well. And he kind of had a rough up and down first year, but his second year really settled in and obviously led the Eagles to the Super Bowl. And my two big games I have for the Cardinals this upcoming season, Week 11 at Seattle. Can they go on the road and win at Seattle in the second half of the year? That's going to be a big question for a pretty young team going to a veteran-led Seattle team who's always seems to be fighting for the playoffs. And then Week 16 at home versus the 49ers. That could be for the division title. That could be for a playoff spot. So that's just, I feel like that's going to be a highlighted game on their schedule all season, a big game for them. And they need to find a way to win at home against especially their division rivals.
All right, I'll tell you what. I don't agree, and I'll get into that later. But you do make a compelling argument, and I can see you're not the first person that I've heard that said that I said that the Cardinals may have some success this year, and I do see why. But I just don't know if the coaching is there, and I'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about the Cardinals. But for my number one seed in the NFC West, I have the Seattle Seahawks. I had them going 11-5, 3-3 in the division, and a 4 seed in the NFC playoff picture. And so I gave their offense a B+. The Seahawks are really all about Russell Wilson. They're kind of a team that I've been counting out for years upon years now, just because I don't think they have the most talent, but they just keep putting up like 10-win seasons and 11-win seasons. It's pretty crazy. So I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to put them at 11-5. Like I said, I don't think they're necessarily a legit title contender in my eyes, but I'm just going through the games and I'm thinking like, oh, Russell Wilson would probably lead them to a win here and just stuff like that. I mean, they've got good guys to throw the ball to. They got Lockett and Metcalf there, who I think are a really solid duo, wide receivers. They have a solid tight end group with Greg Olsen. They added him, and a guy who I don't think a lot of people talk a lot about is Will Dissly. I know he's been banged up in his career, but when he's healthy, he's been proven that he can put up some relatively big numbers. So that's a good tight end group there. It might be as good as the Bucks. It might be as good as the Bucks. But I think their running backs need to stay healthy, and we saw how last year that was a big problem for them. How they had to bring in Marshawn Lynch at the end of the season. So they did add Carlos Hyde, so I think that'll solidify the running back trio there a little bit more with Hyde, Carson, and Penny. But I think the ground game is a really big aspect of the Seahawks offense, so they'll need to stay healthy if they're going to go 11-5. My defense grade, I gave them a B. Like I said, this roster may not be the most talented, but they just keep putting up good seasons, so I'm not counting them out. I would feel a lot more confident in the Seahawks defense if they re-signed Jadeveon Clowney just because they don't really have another proven pass rusher on that front line. They do have some really good linebackers. They Wagner, KJ Wright. Seems like they've been there forever. Probably like a top 3 linebacker group in the NFL. And I mean, they're solid on the back end too. Like, they're not overly impressive, but Shaquille Griffin, Trey Flowers, even Quandre Diggs, like, these are solid NFL players. And I know Pete Carroll is a guy who gets the most out of his defense all the time. So it's not necessarily the Legion of Boom, but I mean, it's not going to be terrible. And for my coach grade, I gave them an A. I think Pete Carroll is probably a top 5 to 7 coach in the NFL. Probably top 5, honestly, just because in the past 8 years they've had 10 or more wins in 7 out of those 8 years. Like, that's just a really impressive stat for the NFL. You know how teams fluctuate all the time. So for him to have his team at that sustained level of success for this long, I don't think there are much better coaches in the NFL than Pete Carroll. And for the breakout player, I thought it was really hard to come up with a breakout player on the Seahawks because this roster is really pretty old when I'm looking at it. They don't have a lot of young guys. So I don't know if this will really count. I'll take the easy way out. I'll say DK Metcalf. I know he sort of kind of broke out last year, but still, he's not like a star wide receiver. But I think that he'll take the step to becoming like the clear number 1 option from the wide receivers from this group. Before it's kind of been Tyler Lockett. So I think DK Metcalf will overcome and take over that role this year. And my 2 big games for the Seahawks, I have Week 5 hosting the Vikings on Sunday Night Football. From our past podcasts, you know how high I am on the Vikings. I think they're a really good team. So that'll be a good game, prime time. And then I have Week 12 at Philadelphia on Monday Night Football. We know there's a little bit of maybe a little bit of bad blood between these 2 teams with the whole playoff. I know Jadeveon Clowney isn't there right now, but kind of a cheap shot on Wentz. And it just seems like the Seahawks always have the Eagles' number, so this will be a big game to see. That'll continue on prime time. Yeah, so like I said, Seahawks may not have the most talented roster when you're looking at it, but I think Russell Wilson is a top 2 quarterback in the NFL, and I'm not going to count him out.
Yeah, they're just such a good team. They always find a way to win. They kind of remind me in the NBA of, like, I mean, not currently, but in previous years, like with the Spurs, where they had Tim Duncan, and then basically around him it was just a bunch of like solid players, no real superstars, nothing really flashy ever, but they always just found a way to win with a really good leader at the helm, and then a really good head coach as well. So I agree with you that they're always just a team that they just find the way to win. But one of the things I thought would be a cool idea, maybe to get like all the people who have been on the podcast or written articles for Beef Up Front. I'm going to see if we can do like each individual makes like a top 10 coaching list for the top 10 coaches in the NFL. Because as we've gone through and gave like grades, I think it'd be cool to see how opinions vary on different coaches throughout the league.
Yeah, I'd be in for that. I think that would be really cool.
But so just I'll piggyback off you. My second place team in the NFC West is the Seahawks. I have them at 10-6, going 3-3 in the division. That's good enough for the 6th seed in the NFC playoffs. So they'll be a playoff team. Mainly a lot of the stuff that you said, I said, but I'll kind of just expand a little. Offense grade, I give him a B+, just because, I mean, Russell Wilson just always finds a way to carry that team. He usually has poor offensive line play and average weapons, but I feel like he always is leading that team to 10 wins. And in my opinion, he's the second best quarterback in the league as well, behind Mahomes. But Lockett and Metcalf, I think they really emerged last year as the year went on. I mean, Lockett's always been a very solid guy. Him and like Doug Baldwin were a very solid duo for a few years, but now it's kind of a new era after Baldwin retired. Lockett and Metcalf could form a very formidable duo going forward. They added Greg Olsen, so I think that's an interesting pickup. We'll see how that goes. Disley is a solid player, like you were saying, but he is coming off an Achilles injury, so I don't know when exactly he'll be back, if he'll be back by week 1 or not, but it'll be interesting to see how that duo works out going forward, and especially with Olsen's health issues over the past few years. And they have a very solid collection of running backs with Hyde, Carson, and former first-round pick Rashad Penny, who was playing pretty well before he tore his ACL. So, and Russell Wilson adds a rushing threat to that as well. So that's definitely it's a run-first team out there. They're going to rely on Wilson to make plays when you need to. So, but they definitely have to have some more guys in the passing game step up, I think, if they want to be a real title contender this year. Defense, I gave them a B-. I really like the linebacker duo of KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner. They've been a great duo for a long time, but they added a first-rounder this year from Texas Tech and Jordan Brooks, who's a tackling machine. I think he's going to start to kind of phase out KJ Wright, and it's going to be like a Brooks-Wagner duo for the next few years, and Wright will be more of a situational player. And maybe the starter at the beginning as Brooks gets eased into it, but they have no elite pass rush, no elite secondary players, so that's going to hurt them a lot. And I agree with you. I think they need to try and get Jadeveon Clowney back to have some sort of player that offensive coordinators and head coaches are going to need to game plan for coming off the edge. Coach Grady gave him A-. Like we were saying, not a very talented roster every year, but he always has them. Coach Carroll always has them in the position to win. He knows how to elevate his players, and it seems like he's a great locker room coach. He's a lot like Doug Peterson. Like, despite all adversity and stuff, his guys always are going to ride for him and play hard for him, and he always has them in a position to win. Breakout player, it was hard to pick one. I agreed with you, but I picked Jordan Brooks, the linebacker, the first rounder. Like I said, he's a tackling machine. I just remember watching stuff and reading about him during the pre-draft process. He just has great sideline to sideline speed, and he's going to be, I think, a 90 to 100 tackle guy consistently throughout his NFL career. So eventually, throughout the year goes on, he's going to start playing more than KJ Wright. And 2 big games, I have Week 3 versus the Cowboys. I have those as 2 of the top-tier teams in the NFC, both playoff teams. So, and they've had some battles over the years with. I remember a few years back when, not even a few years anymore, probably 5 or 6, when Seattle never lost at home and they had the unreal defense, and Tony Romo and DeMarco Murray went into Seattle and beat them. So I just remember that being a great game. They had the playoff game a few years ago. So they've had a lot of good battles over the year for not even being division rivals. So that'll be interesting to see. And Week 17 at 49ers, kind of the same thing I said about with the 49ers and Cardinals. That's going to be playoff time, playoff seeding time. So those are 2 big games, I think, that could impact the Seahawks schedule this season.
I think that was the first time I've ever heard tackling a machine and a Big 12 defensive player used in the same sentence.
Yeah, I mean, tackling machine, because I mean, there's just so many plays are bound to get a bunch of tackles, but you never hear like lockdown secondary players from the Big 12, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right, so I'll move on here. I have my second place team in the NFC West. I have the San Francisco 49ers. Taking a slight step back this year, going 10-6 with a 4-2 record. It is good enough to get them the 7th seed and the last spot in the NFC playoff picture. And offense grade, I gave them a B+. I think they're a really talented team on both ends, and I think a lot of people may expect to see them higher in this division and in the NFC for a long time. But I feel like that's how it always is with the team that represents the NFC in the Super Bowl. Like, everyone's always like, okay, this team's going to be good for a long time. And it's kind of just been a revolving door, like, every year. Like, when you think the Rams missed the playoffs last year after making the Super Bowl. The Eagles finished 9-7, just barely got in. The Falcons, they got the 6th seed, the last playoff spot the year after they went to the Super Bowl. And I think the Panthers got the last spot in the playoffs the year before that. So it's kind of been a reoccurring theme that I don't think a lot of people realize. Like, the NFC is just full of like talented teams every year. No one really has established themselves as like the team ever since like probably the Seahawks did back with the Legion of Boom. But um, going back to the 49ers offense, I like Jimmy G. I think that he's a talented quarterback. Probably like if I was ranking him, he would probably be like an average 15 to 10 quarterback, I would say. I think that's pretty fair. And they have average wide receivers. I know Deebo Samuel just got hurt, but I think he'll be back to for either the first or second year of the season. I don't think he'll miss too much time. But this team really goes with a running style approach with Kyle Shanahan, and I think they have a really good group of running backs with Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert leading the way. And I think they're just going to rely on that offense all on that running game all year. And I mean they lost Joe Staley, but they just added Trent Williams to replace him, so
Yeah.
you can't really get much of a better upgrade, or not upgrade, but just going from one really good player to the next. So I think they struggle a little bit out of the gate, maybe experience a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover, but then turn it on in the second half of the year and end up making the playoffs barely. And my defense grade, I gave the 49ers an A minus. It's a unique situation for their defense because they arguably lost their best pass rusher, but still they have an elite pass rush. I mean, they lost DeForest Buckner, but they still have so much talent there. Bosa will be great. Nick Bosa, sorry. Solomon Thomas is a premier talent in the NFL. They drafted Javon Kinlaw, who I think is one of my favorite, my favorite defensive tackle coming out of the draft this year. And they have a great linebacking group, solid secondary, but you don't even need those units to be great when you have the front four, the front seven that the 49ers have. So I know they were really good last year, and I don't expect there to be much of a change. And my coach grade, I gave them a B plus. I know a lot of people really love Kyle Shanahan right now, and I really like him too, but I'm just not ready to give him an A grade before I see him have more than one successful season in the NFL. I think he still actually has a losing record in the NFL. So before I'm ready to like crown him like one of the top 3 coaches in the NFL, I need to see him do it again. But I do think he'll do that, and I think he'll be a really talented NFL head coach for years to come. My breakout player for the 49ers, I have Brandon Ayuk. I think this was an obvious choice, especially after the loss of Deebo Samuel. So I think Brandon Ayuk will have plenty of time to be sort of the guy in the preseason process and get acclimated to Jimmy G. And he's a really good play. He's a really big playmaker, and I think Shanahan will find ways to use him very efficiently and get the most out of him. So I think he'll have a good rookie year for a wide receiver. And finally, my 2 big games for the 49ers are Week 17 versus the Seahawks, because I have them 1-2 in the division. So this basically decides who wins the division. And I have Week 9 hosting the Packers, just because that's a rematch of the NFC Championship from last year. I know the Packers aren't going to want to have as pathetic of a showing as they did during that game.
All right. So I'll go on. I have the 49ers finishing at 3rd place in the NFC West at 9-7 overall and 3-3 in the division. So that would not be good enough to make the playoffs. And that's kind of all based off the same thing that you were saying. We've seen teams who have made that leap to success, have gone to the Super Bowl or whatnot, and then really fall off the next year. I mean, 9-7 with 7 teams making the playoffs. They'll be right there in contention for that, but I have them just missing. I think finishing in 8th place in the NFC. So I have them finishing in 9th place in the NFC. The Eagles got the 7th seed at 10-6, and the Packers were ahead of them too at 8. So I mean, they'll be right there, competing for a spot, I think, but I think they'll miss it this year. Offense grade, I give them a B. I'm just not a Jimmy G believer. I was never on the 49ers bandwagon last year just because I thought he held them back from really being elite. Can he take a big step uh, from last year and kind of carry the team? That was the difference in the Super Bowl. I was watching highlights of it yesterday after Mahomes signed the extension. He really just took over. Mahomes was playing pretty shitty throughout the whole game, and he really stepped up in the quarter and led the team to victory, while Jimmy G kind of folded and missed some easy throws. So, can he take a big step this year after the meltdown in the Super Bowl? Debo's health is a big question. I've heard that he might start the season on the PUP list. It's a
Really?
Jones fracture in the foot. It wasn't just like a normal break, so it was a whole surgery and everything. So he might not be back for the start of the season. Even if he is, he's not going to be 100% right away, I think, especially with limited training camp reps, no preseason most likely. So who's the number one receiver then if he's out? That's what the big question is for that 49ers offense. I mean, you have George Kittle. He's an elite tight end. He's great at blocking too. That's probably one of the most underrated things in the NFL is George Kittle's ability to block. I see videos of it all the time. How he is kind of just an extension of that offensive line. So the system that Kyle Shanahan runs will help a ton. I've heard that through many different podcasts and read many different things that like Mike Shanahan made system. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan's father. You can turn average players into very good players through that system. So, but they have very stable running backs in Coleman and Mostert. I think that's a very good duo. A very good offensive line, and like you were saying, I like the addition of Ayuk through the draft. His potential. I think he can be a big play guy too. But another thing is, can Jimmy G consistently push the ball down the field and have the guts to throw it downfield and use that speed, use that big play guy that they picked up through the draft? So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I like the 49ers. I like the way that they've built their team kind of from the bottom up. So I'm rooting for them to kind of sustain that success, but I don't know if it's possible with Garoppolo at the helm. I don't know if he's the guy. Defense grade, I give them A minus. That's just an elite unit, but I don't think they're going to be able to replicate the same success as last year. I mean, that was just a freakish year they had. They lost Buckner. They added Kinlaw through the draft, but Buckner was an all-pro player. Can Kinlaw step up and be that level? But if the defense plays as well as they did last year, and the offense can run the ball consistently enough again, and Jimmy G takes care of the ball, then they'll prove me wrong, and they'll be a playoff team, upper tier team in the NFC again. But I think they're bound to take a step back after that freakish season they had last year. Be definitely a top 2 or 3 offensive minded coach in the league, but he's now had 2 Super Bowl meltdowns, one as a head coach and one as an offensive coordinator. So I don't know how I could put him in the A to A minus range with what's going on with that. So I think that he needs to show that he can be a closer in like the big games. And my breakout player, I had Ayuk as well. Like I was saying, big play threat. He could bring the best out of Jimmy G, especially once he gets Debo there. I mean, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, that's going to be a pretty good trio of pass catchers when they're all on the field and healthy. We'll see what he can do, and I think Ayuk as a explosion element to the offense that they were kind of missing last year. 2 big games. I had Week 4 versus the Eagles. I have both, like I was saying, I have both of these teams competing for a wild card spot. So that's going to be a big game. I think as we get down the line later in the season, we're going to be looking back at that one, saying if one of these teams misses the playoffs, if the Eagles would have won or the 49ers would have won, it could have been a different season. And Week 10 at the Saints could be like you've always said, a measuring stick game. See, are they really an elite team? Can they go to New Orleans and win against a team that I have as the number 1 seed in the NFC? So I'm very intrigued to see the 49ers this year. They're, along with the Cardinals, I think these 2 teams are 2 of the teams I have the most anticipation to watch, kind of see, can the Cardinals really take that leap And can the 49ers sustain that success?
Yeah, I don't know. I read something that said Deebo Samuel was he was targeting a return before the season started. So, and like I think a regular Jones fracture would put him right around like the 1 or 2 week mark. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see what the team decides to do and how successful his recovery process is. But
Yeah, with the just because what I heard was because of like if there's no preseason and they need that if they need that roster spot for a guy that they'll have to throw him, they might have to throw him on the pup list. But like players are always saying like if it's like an 8 week injury, they're like, oh, I hope to be back like 4 to 6 weeks, and we usually see teams take it more cautious. So if he's not back by at the beginning of the season, that's definitely going to be a big blow to that offense.
yeah, definitely. So moving on to my third place team, I have the Los Angeles Rams. I've been going 8-8, 3-3 in the division. Obviously, that's not good enough to make the playoffs, so they'll miss out for the second straight year now. And it seems like this team has really dropped off the face of the earth. I mean, it wasn't too long ago they were all the rage, and like everyone was like already anointing Sean McVay the greatest NFL head coach in history. But
Yeah.
they've really lost some popularity over the past year, ever since they sort of floundered in the Super Bowl. But I do think they still have a lot of talent on their team, especially on the offensive side. Um, I gave them a B+ on offense. I think that their wide receiver duo of Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods is a very formidable duo. And I know that in the past years they like to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, but they lost Brandon Cooks, and and towards the end of last year, I know they sort of shifted gears in their offensive philosophy and went towards a 12 personnel and putting another tight end on the field. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in terms of their offensive schematics to start the year. But another fact about the Rams, they drafted Van Jefferson. He's a wide receiver. I don't really have much to say about Van Jefferson other than the fact that for the longest time I thought that Van Jefferson was his last name, and like I didn't realize Van is his first name and Jefferson is his last name. But yeah, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. I found out like a few weeks before the draft, but still.
I did hear he was him along with Judy were the 2 best route runners in the whole draft. So in the McVay system,
Yeah.
that's a big thing with how open guys usually get. I mean, he could be a breakout type player.
Yes, be on the lookout for Van Jefferson. You heard it here first. Rams are another team with a very good tight end duo in Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett. I know I've heard a lot of buzz that tight end duo might be, in fact, maybe better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers tight end group. But yeah, so like I said, last year they started putting both of them on the field at the same time towards the end of the year, and they were really having a lot of success, sort of shifting gears from their play action 3 wide receiver sets before. And a lot of people hate Jared Goff. I don't think he's terrible. I think he's a very good quarterback. I mean, he was drafted #1 for a reason. People can hate on him all he want, but I saw that guy go into New Orleans in that environment, pull out an overtime win to go to the Super Bowl. Like that kind of showed me everything I need to know about Jared Goff. If he can win that game, he can win any game there is. I know he didn't do well in the Super Bowl, but still, the point stands. And he's only 25 years old, so there's plenty of room for growth. My defense grade, I gave them a B+ also. I think the Rams have really hamstringed themselves with all the huge contracts they've given out. I mean, they've just given out monster contracts like left and right to Goff, to Gurley, to Aaron Donald, to Jalen Ramsey. And for that reason, I think they're a very top-heavy team. Like especially on defense, it shows. you got stars like Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, but then after that, the talent just sort of goes into a very steep drop off into unproven players. But even still, you have the best, in my opinion, the best pass rusher in the NFL, or certainly best interior pass rusher in the NFL, and the best cornerback in the NFL on your defense. You're going to be a respectable unit. So I gave him a B plus. My coach grade, I also gave the Rams a B plus. I just think they're a very average team. That's probably why I have them going 8-8. Like I said, Sean McVay got exposed as a fraud a little bit last year. Everyone fell in love with him when he could name every player on the Bears defense, but kind of showed last year that I think any coach can probably name the players he's going to play against, so it's really not that big of a deal. But I'm sorry. But I think I could have been just the sort of thing that Sean McVay needed. Was last year missing the playoffs to sort of humble himself, and I think that he'll come back this year, and I think you'll see like sort of a more motivated Sean McVay. So I don't know. I'd probably put him around the 10th best coach in the NFL. Like I said, he made it to the Super Bowl. So, and my breakout player, I've been sort of touching on this throughout my whole breakdown of this team, but I have Tyler Higbee. The last 5 games of the year last year, he had over 100 yards in 4 out of the 5 games, and in the other game, he had 89 yards. So, like I said, he was a guy who was really coming on strong towards the end of the year last year. And if the Rams do decide to stick with that philosophy and go 12 personnel, I think Tyler Higbee could be a guy who kind of catapults into the top 5 tight ends in the league. And my 2 big games for the Rams, I have Week 10 hosting the Seahawks, sort of a big divisional rivalry game that the Rams sort of need to win if they want to maintain relevancy as like sort of a playoff caliber team. And then I have Week 14 hosting the Patriots because that's a Super Bowl rematch, and the Rams probably want to do better than they did in the Super Bowl. So that'll be a good game.
Yeah, just going off of what you were saying about Higbee, last night, for those of you who haven't listened yet, me and Brendan O'Donnell did a Fantasy Sleepers podcast, and that was one of Brendan's sleepers at tight end. He was actually, in PPR leagues, he had the 8th most fantasy ends last year, so that was something I was very surprised at.
Yeah, didn't get a chance to listen yet.
Okay. Yeah, that was just something I was very surprised at. But I mean, when you really think about it, like how many good like tight ends are there in the league, especially when it comes to fantasy, that you could feel confident putting out. But with a guy like Cook's leaving, Higbee's role could grow this upcoming year. I definitely agree with you.
I mean, all the good tight ends they're all on the Bucks, so kind of makes them all irrelevant when they're all on the same team.
They probably have 3 of the top, I'd say 12 tight ends in the league.
Okay, you're just trolling now.
No, that's probably. Name me the 15 best tight ends.
Off the top of my head, I can assure you Cameron Brate would not be on that list. But
really?
Continue. Top 15 tight ends in the league. Get out of here.
So the interesting thing about this, I mean, obviously you haven't talked about the Cardinals yet, so they'll be your last place team. They were my first place team, so it'll be interesting to see kind of who was right throughout the year. But my 4th place team is the Rams. I have them finishing at 6-10, going 2-4. For offense, I gave them a B. I think Goff's an average QB who benefits from the scheme. I love Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, though. I don't know how they can be underrated, but I mean, they're just not 2 of the premier. Like, they always seem to be putting up big numbers, especially fantasy. It always feels like they're putting up like 8 catches, like 100 yards, and like a touchdown, like each game. I mean, at least when I'm playing them, it feels like that. I think Cam Akers is going to be a stud. I think he's going to be the offensive rookie of the year at running back. I mean, that's who my breakout player is for the Rams. I think he has big potential, and he was one of my sleepers last night for the fantasy sleeper podcast as well. I just think he got caught up with really bad coaching at Florida State. Now that he's in an offensive system designed by Sean McVay, he's got McVay calling plays, and the Rams rely heavily on the run, as we've seen over the years with Todd Gurley, to set up the play action based passing offense that they thrive off of. So I think Akers is due for a big rookie year, and he's going to be the like offensive like running back that we look at and we're like, how'd he like fall in the draft? Like it feels like there's always one of those guys each year. But just to finish off on the offensive line is definitely a big question mark. You got Whitworth, but other than that, not many big name guys across that line, and they lost that downfield speed threat with Brandon Cooks. He's kind of faded over the past few years and hasn't been the elite player that he was towards the beginning of his career, but that's still a guy who just gives the defense another person to think about and could produce big plays when healthy. Defense grade, I also gave him a B. They have Ramsey and Donald, who are probably the two best players at their positions in the NFL. But outside of them, the defense is kind of a big question mark. I think it'll be interesting to see what they can do, who can step up, and if they can kind of hold teams while the offense is going to put up points. I mean, I gave them only a B, but I still think they're going to put up points. And just to touch more on the offense, I do like Higbee as well, like we were saying. So I think that offense will put up points, even though I only gave them a B. I just don't think they have like that many elite players that scare teams, so that's why I kind of held them back. But the defense, I gave them a B as well, just because Ramsey and Donald, I mean, those are two elite players. I think the Rams are just going to be in a ton of shootouts, and that might be the way Sean McVay likes it. I think that his offense can outlast the other teams, but for coach grade, I gave him a B+. I literally have here in my notes kind of exactly what you said. Everyone kind of stopped worshiping everything he did last year because the Rams were struggling. So he kind of came back down to earth. Still a great offensive coach, though, great play caller, one of the more innovative minds in today's game. Can he help take Jared Goff to another level? That's kind of the testament of a coach, where I'm interested to see the same thing with the 49ers. Can Kyle Shanahan get Jimmy G to another level? They took that big step back after being in the Super Bowl the year before. So can he get back into that top-tier coaches where people are back to worshiping his every move? Kind of bring up Claire. I was already talking about Akers. And the last thing I have on the Rams are two big games. Week 1 versus the Cowboys, opening new stadium out in LA, big market. They're playing the most popular NFL team in the Dallas Cowboys week 1. So, and then week 14, I have the Patriots as well. It's a big game, the Super Bowl rematch from maybe a few years ago. So it's definitely a revenge game. Even though Brady's gone, it's still going to be it's the team that beat them in the Super Bowl. So it'll be interesting to see that going forward.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the ratio of Rams fans to Cowboys fans is at that game, because I feel like there's a lot of Cowboys fans in LA. But I have a question for you. It just came to my mind. If you had to pick one quarterback, who would it be? Jared Goff or Jimmy G?
I thought before I answer that, I was kind of thinking like Goff and Cousins are kind of like viewed the same, I think, and I thought you were gonna ask that. I feel like through many people, but I think I would take Goff. I think he's more talented and he's got a better arm. Like we've seen him make a lot of great throws, but that could also be scheme dominant. I just think when push comes to shove, if I need a guy who's gonna lead me on a drive, I think I'd probably rather pick Goff. I think he's got better talent.
Yeah, I think I would agree, and I completely agree with your breakout player. I think Cam Akers is going to have a huge year. Someone that I'm definitely targeting in some of my fantasy drafts this year. So I'll move on to my last place team. We all know who it is. It's your first place team, the Arizona Cardinals. I've been going 6-10 with a 2-4 record. 2-4 divisional record, but I think it's been very, very big self-restraint, or or a big letdown that we have talked about the NFC West for this long, and we haven't mentioned probably the greatest nickname uh, for all NFL stadiums is the Arizona Cardinals, the Big Toaster.
I've never heard that until you said that like a few weeks ago. I thought that was interesting. I've
that's
never heard
that's
that name used.
that's what Berman said. Berman would always call it that. He'd be
Oh,
like,
okay.
now going to the Big Toaster. Um, but yeah. I have their offense grade. I have them as B plus. I think that this offense looks really good on paper. They have really good wide receivers. They added Hopkins, like you said. I really like Christian Kirk. I'll get to him. I think he's my breakout player. Um, so obviously, good wide receiver group. Kenyan Drake. A lot of people are very high on him this year. I know he had his best season ever last year, but I feel like looking at the stats, he's a very boom or bust guy, where he kind of has big games and then he doesn't have big games, or he has like really small games. So I have to see him grind it out week by week. I don't really know if I can anoint an NFL offense as like elite if they have Kenyan Drake as their one of their like main guys, just because I feel like Kenyan Drake has been hyped up before, like in Miami, and never really worked out. Um, but I do like Kyler Murray, and I understand why the hype is so big on him. That it's a second-year quarterback, and it seems like every year, second-year quarterback becomes MVP. But I don't know. It just seems like this team is built for warm weather. I don't want to really get into that stereotype because they do play on the West Coast, but I just don't know if I don't see this team being able to go into like tough environments and sort of grind out wins. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to say the cliche, can they win in the cold, but just because I really feel that way about this team. But I feel like they could be one.
Even the Seahawks, when you go there, I mean the weather's always really bad there. It'll be interesting to see. I think like I had as one of my big games. I think it's like week 11 when they play them. That's like around November-ish that time. So that's like just even a division game, not still on the West Coast. That'll be definitely tough weather environment.
So I think this could be a team that's just like 1 year away, where they've got their quarterback, they added a big weapon. Let's kind of see. I don't know. I don't think they'll have the best. I think they sort of caught a tough break with this offseason, how they don't really have a lot of time to
Yeah.
gel between Hopkins and Murray. So I don't know. We'll see how their offense works out. Their defense, great. I gave them a B. I'm really unsure of their pass rush besides Chandler Jones. I know Jones is really good, but other than that, um, nothing really there on the front four or three. I'm not sure what defense they play, but I don't know how much I can really rely on their linebackers either, just because I can tell you right now, Jordan Hicks will most likely not play every game. Uh, gets hurt all the time, and Isaiah Simmons, like you said, he could play anywhere, but I don't really know how much of a benefit that is, because we've seen guys come out of the draft before, like a Jabril Peppers, where
Hmm.
they can play everywhere, but it ends up being like kind of a detriment to them because they don't have a spot. So I
Yeah.
know Isaiah Simmons is probably a little bigger than Peppers was, but I'm not ready to say Isaiah Simmons is going to become a star NFL defensive player when he doesn't really have a position right now. Um, but like you said, the secondary is a very solid secondary with Buda Baker and Patrick Peterson. So that's kind of the strength of this defense. I just don't know about up front, and I think that's how you win in today's game. So, and my coach grade, I gave them a B. Cliff Kingsbury is kind of reminds me of Sean McVay, but just without success. Um, like everyone falls in love with him just because he's this young offensive mind, but
Hmm.
the only difference to me between the two is that Sean McVay has shown he can actually win in this league, and Kingsbury hasn't even shown me he can really win in the college league. I think he had a losing record at Texas Tech, so I don't know. And he had a
With
losing record
Patrick
last year.
Mahomes.
Yeah, like it's not exactly a stellar resume. I don't think
Yeah.
that's impressive. So I don't know. I'm not sold on Kingsbury. I'm not sold on the coaching for this team. My breakout player, I had wide receiver Christian Kirk. I had him on my fantasy team last year, and I know he had a very quietly good year, and he was banged up for a couple of games, but when he was in, he still put up solid numbers, and I think he really has a relationship with Kyler Murray that sort of wasn't there with Larry Fitzgerald, or I think he had a stronger relationship with Christian Kirk, and I think coming into year two, we'll only see that grow. And the number one cornerbacks will be on Hopkins, so I think Kirk will get plenty of targets if he can just stay healthy. And my two big games for the Cardinals, I have week one at the 49ers. Sort of a game to show me if they're good or not. I know you're really high on them, and if they go into San Francisco and win, I'll have to reassess my views on the team. And then I have week 14 at the Giants, just because I always like to throw in sort of like a battle of two weaker teams in my big games, just because if you beat enough of the bad teams, you'll become like a solid team. So, I mean, it's true. Like, it's the difference between being a 2-14 team and a 6-10 team is can you beat who wins the games between bad teams. But yeah, so those are my two big games for the Cardinals.
So are you buying into the Kyler Murray MVP hype?
No, I can't say that I am. If I have him going 6-10, I don't think he'll be winning the MVP. I do think I like Kyler Murray. It's just I don't know about the team around him.
Do you think the coaching holds him back?
Yeah, I do. Like, what has Cliff Kingsbury ever done that has shown that he can be successful?
Yeah, it's a big question mark. I mean, you did give him a B, though.
Yeah, just because, I don't know, the offense puts up good numbers, and I guess he looks good, and he has an impressive house. It's tough to give a guy like that a bad grade. It does remind me sort of the situation of Doug Peterson. So I can see, just because he never had any real success, and then his first year he was also like 7-9, but then he came out all of a sudden. So I guess there is a track record for that happening. I just don't know about Cliff Kingsbury, just because it seems like everywhere he's been, he hasn't won.
I think we can both agree that this is at least on paper, the most talented division in the NFL.
Yeah. At least out of the divisions that we've done so far, yeah, I think I can agree with that.
I think you can make a compelling argument for, if not all of the teams, at least 3 out of the 4 teams to be playoff teams this year.
Absolutely.
Division. But just before we wrap this up, do you by any chance have your NFC playoff just like bracket in front of you?
Yeah, I can pull it up right now.
All right. While you pull that up, I'll just go through mine just to wrap up our NFC part. So I had the New Orleans Saints finishing as the 1 seed, going 12-4. The 2 seed was the Cardinals, going 12-4 as well. Then the 3 seed Cowboys winning the East at 11-5. The 4 seed Vikings going 10-6, winning the North. Then your first wild card, you have the Bucks at 11-5 as the 5 seed. The 6 seed, I have the Seahawks at 10-6. And then the Eagles as 7 seed at 10-6. So, I mean, reminder to everyone out there that there's only one bye this year, so that bye would be going, according to my projections, to the Saints, and the Eagles pick up that newly found 7th playoff spot. At a later, once we do the whole AFC as well, then we could do like one final podcast where we just go through our playoff bracket and who we think's gonna go on and whatnot.
All right, yeah, 1 second. I'm just pulling it up. It logged me out of my account, so I gotta log back in. I was confused for a second because I saw this like randomly generated standings, and I was like, this is not what I have.
So you had Seahawks at 10-6 winning the division.
I think I had them 11
11
and 5.
11 and
Yeah.
5. So you have them in at the 4 seed.
Yeah. Hold on, this is being weird right now.
If it's not letting you pull it up, we can just hit on it before we start off the AFC East.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do that just because it's not showing my standings. It's showing like a randomly generated situation. I could pull up all of the different
It's all right.
notes for the podcast.
Yeah, we'll start off with our NFC brackets at the beginning of next show.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. I hope you guys enjoyed the NFC part. For those of you still listening, please like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff as we continue to grow. I appreciate the support and look forward to hitting up the AFC side, and hopefully we have some football coming up soon. Training camp is supposed to start on July 28th, so we'll see. Anything else, Kev?
No, just fingers crossed. Hopefully we get some football.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.